"You're jealous of your brother," my mother whispered over my birthday cake. "Then let him pay your bills," I snapped. And that was when I deactivated every utility card and rent payment I'd been covering. My name is Melissa Harper. I just turned 32. I should have been enjoying the candles at the upscale restaurant I'd reserved and paid for. Instead, my mother leaned in, her perfume too close, repeating, "You jealous of your brother." After years of covering the family finances, a part of me finally broke. If you've ever been the family ATM, tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. Here's how I finally stood up for myself. I grew up in Chicago, with my younger brother Ryan. I'm 32 now. He's 27. As kids, the 5-year gap barely mattered. We lived in a solid middle-class neighborhood, tree-lined streets, modest houses, and rode our bikes until the streetlights came on. Mom and Dad both worked hard to keep things afloat. From early on, we were different. School came easily to me, straight as, without huge effort, always with my nose in a book. Ryan struggled academically, but had a charm that won people over. He could talk his way out of trouble, while I calculated compound interest for fun. We were close. I tutored him. He scared off boys who teased me for being too smart. We built blanket forts, swore silly oaths, and defended each other from neighborhood bullies. Everything shifted when I was 14, and Ryan was 9. My parents' fights escalated, hushed arguments after bedtime, awkward silences. Then Dad packed and left, saying he'd see us soon. Mom cried for weeks. I started working, babysitting, shelving books at the library. Then at 16, juggling a 20-hour week at a coffee shop, while keeping my GPA. The extra money helped with groceries and school supplies. Ryan stayed his easygoing self, assuming things would sort out. When Northwestern offered me a full scholarship in finance, it felt like proof my effort mattered. I commuted to save on housing, interned at Bridgewater Financial, making coffee runs and organizing spreadsheets, and after graduation accepted a junior analyst role there. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and constant networking eventually earned me a senior financial advisor title. My clients trusted me, a responsibility I never took lightly. My small apartment became my sanctuary. Nothing extravagant, but paid for with savings and careful planning. The first time I helped Ryan financially seemed innocent. During his sophomore year at Illinois State, he called in a panic. Mom couldn't afford his textbooks. I covered $800. He promised he'd repay me when he graduated and landed a job in marketing. That temporary help turned into a pattern. Expensive birthday gifts, repeated car repairs, a security deposit for his first post-college apartment. Promises to repay never materialized. By my 30s, I'd been promoted to team leader at Bridgewater. My investments grew, but not as quickly as they could have. For my 30th, I wanted a proper celebration, the whole family together. I booked Lestro, the restaurant I'd admired for years. The chef had just earned a Michelin star. Reservations were rare. I put down a $500 deposit and felt excited. I bought a dress, splurged on hair. This birthday was supposed to mark what I'd built for myself. 6 months before my birthday, Ryan lost his job at Vertex Media. His junior content creator role was cut. He told me not to worry. The job market was hot, and he'd be back on his feet in weeks. When his landlord threatened eviction after missed rent payments, I offered to help. $1,800 a month for his downtown place wasn't charitable. It was manageable for me. He hugged me, promising to pay back with interest. Weeks turned into months. Supposedly he'd applied, interviews were scheduled. Yet his Instagram showed rooftop bars, festivals, and weekend trips. At family dinners, Mom defended him. The job market is brutal for his generation. Ryan's girlfriend Amber only complicated matters, stylish, often between modeling gigs, appearing to have expensive tastes, and no steady income. 3 months before my birthday, he called his car had been repossessed. 2 days later, he'd signed for a certified pre-owned Audi at 9% interest. Not fancy, he said. Around this time I noticed he'd been using my Netflix, Spotify, and phone plan. I found odd shows in my continue watching, unexplained data spikes. He shrugged. We're family. Then he asked me to add his electric, gas, and internet to my autopay just until things turn around. The week of my birthday, he Venmo'd me $200 for something he'd bought as a gift for me. I sent it anyway. At work I was bringing lunch instead of joining colleagues at sushi. A coworker joked, budget cuts, not knowing the truth. My friend Taylor noticed I looked stressed. I'd checked my credit score and it had dropped 40 points. The card I'd always paid off was now revolving. Interest was accruing while I covered Ryan's expenses. The morning of my birthday, Ryan asked if he could bring Amber. I hesitated but agreed, recalculating the per-person cost. Mom called asking if I'd ordered chocolate ganache, Ryan's favorite when I preferred vanilla. I changed the order. The bakery charged an extra $50 for the last-minute swap. Past birthdays came back to me. Ryan's 21st with a $2,000 table I'd paid for, his 20th at a beach resort weekend I organized and funded. He somehow ended up with gifts more extravagant than mine. Mom would say he's just starting out, while giving him items from my wish list. My own presents were practical, kitchen gadgets, business books. At home I kept a spreadsheet, everything itemized. A tab labeled Ryan showed the truth. $42,000 over 2 years on rent, car payments, transfers, and family gifts. My credit card balance showed $5,000 carried for 3 months, the first time I hadn't paid it in full. The interest stung. It was money I lectured clients about wasting. I arrived at Lystro early. The private dining room was exactly what I'd imagined. Exposed brick, string lights, elegant settings. Mom arrived late, air-kissing my cheek and revealing a new burgundy Prada purse I'd admired online. She smiled and said Ryan picked it out. Ryan and Amber showed up 45 minutes late, without apologies. He launched into a shopping story. Amber displayed new ankle boots. We're so broke, she said, in designer clothes, but they were 60% off. When drinks arrived, Ryan theatrically patted his pockets. I forgot my wallet. Can you spot me? He asked. A Venmo that never materialized. I noticed his new watch, a 4-figure stainless steel piece with a blue face. When I asked, he deflected. Mom laughed at Ryan's stories, interrupted me when I tried to mention my promotion, and placed Ryan in the center when someone suggested a family photo, physically nudging me to the edge. The gesture hit me with a childhood memory. Age 12, opening small earrings I asked for while Ryan unwrapped an expensive gaming console I'd secretly covered with my babysitting cash. I never said anything. As main courses came, Ryan and Amber chatted about an Airbnb weekend in Michigan wine country. Mom patted his hand. You deserve a vacation. Meanwhile, I mentally tallied the additional rent and payments I was covering. Ryan complained about his landlord being unreasonable. I took a large sip of wine and met Taylor's knowing glance. The pending transactions in my bank showed 3 months' worth of rent scheduled to process at midnight. The cake arrived, 3 tiers of chocolate ganache with gold dust, exactly what Mom insisted on. The table lit with candles, faces turned toward me. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this moment would feel special. Ryan leaned over to Amber, whispering about the lake house and jet skis. His hand rested on her thigh. His new watch glittered in the candlelight. Mom overheard and said aloud, Ryan deserves a nice vacation after all the stress. I calculated how many extra hours I'd need to cover upcoming expenses. When the staff began the birthday song, it should have been the highlight. Instead, it felt hollow. As the song ended and I leaned in to make a wish, Mom's voice was soft and clear beside my ear. You're jealous of your brother, she said, smiling for the people around us. In that second, every sacrifice flashed through me. Working through high school while Ryan did extracurriculars, commuting to save money while he lived in dorms, taking overnight shifts while he partied in his vacations skipped, investments delayed, dreams set aside, all so I could be the responsible one. A certainty crystallized. Nothing I did would ever be enough. The family dynamic was fixed. Ryan the golden child, me the one expected to guarantee his comfort. Then let him pay his own bills, I replied, voice steady. Mom blinked, confused. But Ryan sensed the shift. "Excuse me," Mom said, smile strained. I set my napkin down carefully. I said it again. "Let Ryan pay his own bills. All of them, starting tonight." "Mel, what are you talking about?" Ryan laughed nervously, glancing around as conversations faltered. "Your rent, $1,800 monthly for the past 6 months. Your car payment, $712. Your phone on my family plan. Your Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, the utilities you couldn't manage, electric, gas, internet, the credit card I added you to as an authorized user, the loans you never repaid." My voice stayed calm, every detail precise. "I'm shutting down every payment starting tonight." Amber's jaw dropped. "You pay all his bills?" she asked, shocked. "All of them?" Ryan tried charm. "Mel helps out while I'm between jobs. It's temporary, right?" He laughed it off. I answered with the spreadsheet figures burned into my memory. $42,000 in the last 2 years, that's not temporary. And it isn't helping. It's enabling dependency. Mom hissed, the public facade cracking. "This is inappropriate. You're making a scene on your birthday." "Yes, it is my birthday," I said, standing slowly. "And for once I'm giving myself a gift that matters, financial independence for all of us." "You don't mean this." Mom reached for my hand. "We can discuss it privately." "Not here, not like this." I pulled away. "I absolutely mean it. I've covered every expense, made every sacrifice, and only been asked for more. I'm done." Ryan's easy confidence faded. Panic crept into his face as my words landed. "But the rent is due next week," he stammered. "And the car payment?" "You can't just," he began. "I can, and I am," I cut in. "You're 27, Ryan. It's time you pay your own bills." The cake sat between us, candles softening into the frosting. No one made a wish. I set $300 on the table to cover dinner, stood up and walked out of my own birthday without looking back. Behind me I heard Mom call my name and Ryan raise his voice. But I didn't turn. Outside, the night air felt unexpectedly clean. Guilt and relief tangled inside me. But as I drove home, the agitation eased into a steady resolve. By the time I pulled into my assigned spot, my hands had stopped shaking. At my apartment, I went straight to my laptop. The glow of the screen filled the living room as I logged into my online banking. Ryan's financial ties to me were extensive and needed to be undone carefully. I started with the automatic rent payments to Highland Property Management, the $1,800 monthly transfer labeled Ryan Harper Rent. I found the recurring transfer and canceled the series. A warning asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. Next came utilities: electric, gas, internet. Each provider required a separate login. I removed my payment information and began transfers of service back to the account holder. One site warned service might be interrupted if alternate arrangements weren't made within 3 business days. I took screenshots of each cancellation from my records. The phone plan was harder. Ryan had been on my family plan for 7 years, regularly using more data than our shared limit allowed. I logged into the carrier portal, removed him as an authorized user, and initiated a transfer so his number could move to a separate account. The confirmation noted he'd need to set up his own payment method within 5 days to keep service. The credit card company required a late-night phone call. I need to remove an authorized user and request a new card for the primary account holder. I told the representative. Marcus handled it efficiently, asking no question. I emailed Ryan's landlord a formal notice. Effective immediately, I was terminating financial responsibility for tenant Ryan Harper at 1420 Lakeview Apartments. Unit 3007. Any automatic payments from my accounts were unauthorized after today's date. By 2 a.m. I had methodically severed every financial connection to my brother. Each cancellation brought a mix of anxiety and relief. Like cutting anchors I hadn't realized were holding me down. The last step was updating my budget spreadsheet and deleting the Ryan categories. The difference was immediate. My monthly cash flow showed a surplus instead of a deficit. I stared at the new figures, feeling a weight lift. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. When I woke, my phone showed the fallout: 27 missed calls, 43 texts, and 16 emails. The messages followed a familiar pattern: confusion, what happened last night; anger, you can't just cut me off; then panic, the landlord calling about canceled rent; and pleading, please cover this month while I figure it out. Mom's voicemails shifted between guilt, how could you embarrass your brother, and pressure, fix this now, or don't expect to be welcome. Amber took their case public with vague social posts about toxic family members. Mutual acquaintances messaged, seeing only one version of events. One unexpected text came from Connor, Ryan's college roommate. Been waiting years for someone to make Ryan grow up. Tough love, but necessary. Stay strong, Melissa. That felt oddly validating. After coffee and a long shower, I made one more practical decision: change the locks. The spare key I'd given Ryan for emergencies had been used whenever I worked late. Food went missing and items were borrowed. A locksmith arrived at noon and replaced the deadbolt. $300 later, I had new keys and a reinforced boundary. Monday morning, I met with my financial advisor, Barbara. Humbling for someone who advises others for a living. I explained everything. She listened without judgment, then helped me map a recovery plan for my depleted savings and revolving credit. You're in better shape than you think, she said as she reviewed the revised budget. 6 months of disciplined spending and you'll be back on track. By Friday night, I realized something small and startling. I could afford dinner out again, not anything lavish, but a neighborhood bistro I'd loved before. Ryan's financial strain began dominating my budget. Being able to order without mentally calculating whether it would cover his car payment felt revolutionary. The real test came the next Wednesday. Midway through a client meeting, our receptionist interrupted. Ryan was in the lobby demanding to see me. I excused myself and found him pacing marble floors, disheveled and agitated, eyes red, hair unwashed. You need to fix this, he said loudly enough for others to hear. They're going to shut off the electricity tomorrow, and the landlord has started eviction proceedings. This isn't funny. I'm at work, I replied calmly, aware of colleagues nearby. This isn't the place for this conversation. Where then? He demanded, raising his voice. You won't answer my calls or texts. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to pay your own bills, I said, keeping eye contact. With what money? I don't have a job, he nearly shouted. I signaled discreetly to security, who stepped in. That's a problem you need to solve. I can recommend employment agencies. His look of betrayal almost made me falter, but I didn't. When he refused to move, security escorted him to the elevators. Colleagues checked on me afterward. Jessica brought coffee and admitted she'd been worried. You seemed stretched thin, she said. You handled that with more grace than most. That weekend was the first in a long time without a Ryan-related financial emergency. No frantic calls, no last-minute requests. The silence felt strange and liberating, like learning to breathe again after being underwater. 1 week after the dinner incident, Mom hosted a family dinner that I wasn't invited to. My cousin Sophia called afterward to tell me how the night went. Ryan dominated conversation, painting me as cruel and abandoning him. Mom supported his version entirely. Sophia said awkwardly, I just thought you should know what they're saying. I thanked her and decided I wouldn't defend myself to people uninterested in both sides. The next day I made 2 important calls. First, to a therapist Barbara recommended, Dr. Eliza Coleman, who specialized in family dynamics and boundary work. I'd once dismissed those terms, but now I recognized I needed help. The intake session itself clarified a lot. You've been in a caretaking role beyond what's reasonable between siblings, she observed. Those patterns are painful to change, but continuing them harms everyone involved. My second call was to Taylor, whom I'd been avoiding. Over coffee, I told her the full extent of my financial support for Ryan. She was surprised at the numbers. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. I wasn't sure. Family loyalty, embarrassment, it had simply become normal. In the following weeks, I reconnected with friends. I drifted from during years of financial strain. Dinners returned. Weekend wine trips resumed, and I reinstated a theater subscription I'd canceled to cover Ryan's car insurance. Small pleasures came back one by one. 3 weeks after our confrontation, Ryan's landlord called. Mr. Dr. Harper said he'd expected me to cover the outstanding balance. When I explained the situation had changed, the landlord sighed. Eviction proceedings will continue then, he said. Mom reacted with immediate anger on the phone, demanding how I could sleep knowing my brother might be homeless. I had a calm, rehearsed response. He has options. Get a job. Move to a cheaper place. Ask friends. I've sent him information on emergency rental assistance and employment agencies. Mom kept insisting that because he was her son, that overrode everything. I replied, I love him, but enabling him financially isn't love. It's harming us both. An unexpected ally called Uncle James, my dad's brother, who I hadn't seen much since the divorce. Your father would be proud, he said. He'd long worried Mom's approach spoiled Ryan. Setting boundaries is the hardest and kindest thing you can do right now. By 2 months out, my budget was recovering. I made my first small deposit back into savings. The credit card balance began shrinking. I even started looking at vacation options for later in the year, something I hadn't done in ages. News about Ryan trickled in. He'd taken a retail job, an entry-level position he'd previously dismissed. Amber left when lifestyle changes became apparent. Her social media showed a new boyfriend with a luxury car and travel photos. Ryan's social feeds went quiet. At a cousin's wedding I attended reluctantly. Mom kept her distance and introduced me curtly. Extended family seemed confused. Many had only heard one version of events. During the reception, I gave a factual, unemotional account when asked about the birthday dinner. Some relatives reacted with surprise and sympathy. By dessert, a few who'd been distant earlier offered support. It's about time someone stood up to the golden child dynamic, Aunt Joanne whispered. 3 months after our confrontation, Ryan texted, got promoted to shift lead, starting financial literacy class at community college next month. Not asking for anything, just thought you should know. I stared at the message, then replied, congratulations on both. That's genuinely great news. I'm proud of you. No financial requests followed, only a cautious acknowledgement of progress. At the family Easter gathering, tension lingered, but had softened. Ryan arrived in a used Honda rather than the repossessed Audi, and lived with roommates in a cheaper apartment. Mom still made excuses, but Ryan himself seemed quieter and more thoughtful, sometimes joking about learning adulting the hard way. When Christmas plans came up, a time I'd routinely been assigned the expensive elements, Ryan interrupted, maybe we should all contribute what we can this year. Split things more evenly. The pause that followed felt like a small victory, not reconciliation, but recognition that the family dynamic needed to change. 6 months after my 30th birthday, my finances had transformed. The credit card was paid off, my emergency fund replenished, and retirement contributions back on schedule. Barbara noted I was back on track for long-term goals, without detours. My apartment reflected the internal shift. I repainted the living room sage green, installed bookshelves to display a collection that had been hidden, and added small quality upgrades. A better coffee maker, local art, healthy plants. The space felt personal rather than merely functional. Ryan's life had changed too. His new, smaller apartment in a working-class neighborhood was half the size of his previous unit, and lacked earlier amenities. When I finally visited, the place was clean and organized. He'd bought and refinished a second-hand dining table himself. His retail job led to a promotion, shift supervisor with inventory responsibilities and training duties. Not my dream career, he admitted over coffee between our apartments, but it pays the bills. Regional management sees potential if I stick with it. That coffee was our first one-on-one since the confrontation, arranged cautiously through text. He apologized without being prompted. I took advantage of your generosity for years. I treated it like something I deserved. The admission was meaningful because it was uncoerced. What changed? I asked. Reality, he said dryly. Nothing teaches priorities like having the electricity shut off in January or living on ramen because you spent grocery money on concert tickets. The financial literacy class helped too. Did you know credit cards charge 24% interest? No, he said. I might have mentioned that once or twice. I allowed a small smile. I wasn't listening before. The hardest part for him wasn't the money, but realizing who he'd been, a version of himself he didn't want to stay. Mom struggled with the new dynamic, occasionally suggesting I cover larger purchases or family gifts. Each time I held the boundary, Doc Coleman had helped me craft firm but kind refusals without lengthy explanations. She'll adjust, Uncle James reassured me over lunch. Changing the story Mom invested in takes time. Thanksgiving was the first major holiday under the new arrangement. We switched to a potluck so everyone contributed what they could. Ryan brought rolls and wine, modest but proportionate. Mom made the turkey and accepted others' dishes. The tension didn't vanish, but interactions felt healthier. Ryan surprised everyone with a thoughtful, low-cost gift, framed childhood photos for each family member. It was the effort, not the price, that mattered. My therapy with Dr. Coleman moved from crisis management to deeper work on family patterns. This dynamic you described is classic, she said during one particularly useful session, helping me understand how caretaking roles become normalized and how boundaries, though difficult, create space for healthier relationships. You were labeled the capable one, the responsible one, a compliment, until you realize it means you're never allowed to show vulnerability or ask for help. Ryan was cast as the perpetually needy sibling. That might look like an easier role until you see how it infantilizes him and blocks growth. Therapy helped me see that my enabling went beyond money. It was emotional too. By always fixing Ryan's problems, I kept him dependent even while I resented that dependence. Our session mantra became helping isn't always helping. True support sometimes requires stepping back. The most surprising outcome was how comfortable I became at saying no, without guilt or long explanations. I started declining optional projects that didn't advance my goals and refusing social obligations that drained me. The boundaries I set with Ryan became a model for healthier limits across my life. Dating re-entered my world unexpectedly. Michael, a client's brother I met at a charity event, asked me out after we bonded over hiking and obscure documentaries. By our third date, we talked frankly about my family situation, something that would have mortified me months earlier. Instead, it felt like a test of compatibility. Boundaries aren't just good, they're necessary, he said, and I was impressed by how naturally he understood. My sister had a similar experience with our cousin. The most loving thing she did was stop solving his problems. Watching Ryan change was the most profound lesson. His hardship forced growth my protection had prevented, budgeting, steady work, and resilience that no amount of advice from me could have instilled. The brother who emerged was more grounded and more like the person I'd hoped he could become. I'm thinking about community college, he told me over lunch. Business management. The company has tuition assistance if I go full-time. The pride in his voice was different from his old bravado. As my next birthday neared, Ryan called with an offer. I want to take you to dinner. Nothing fancy, just Brady's Grill on Elmwood. It's within my budget. Tears came not because the place was modest, but because he was finally giving what he could genuinely afford instead of making promises he couldn't keep. The shift from resentment to healthy boundaries wasn't smooth. There were awkward family events, tense conversations, and occasional slips back into old roles. Mom still sometimes called me selfish for holding firm, but beneath that friction was a new authenticity, relationships built on real connection, not financial dependence. The deepest lesson wasn't about money. It was about having the courage to redefine family on healthier terms. Love doesn't mean endless sacrifice or rescuing someone from consequences. Sometimes it means standing firm while someone you love faces necessary struggles. The most generous gift can be refusing to give what ultimately harms both people. Looking back at that night of melting candles, what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. For Ryan, for me, and for our family. We're rebuilding and it's different from before, but more sustainable than one-sided sacrifice. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with family who took your generosity for granted? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experience in the comments. If this story resonated, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need it. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for others is stop solving their problems and let them grow through their own challenges. Thanks for listening. I wish you strength on your journey to healthier relationships.